Hi, I'm Brian Germain, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the psychology of skydiving. We have an emotional side and an intellectual side, and they both want to jump out of an airplane. However, sometimes the emotional side has a little trouble figuring out whether it's appropriate or not. And so that discernment skill is one of the most important things of all. And so when we consider jumping out of an airplane with given conditions, specific gear, the type of jump that you plan on, the evaluation process is quite important. The trouble is that the human mind is a subjective tool. And so we have all sorts of thoughts going on in our heads, and some of them are serving us, and some of them aren't. So we have this sort of sane and neurotic side of each of us. And sometimes the voice in our head is giving us information that we really, really need that says, don't jump. And so this discussion that I'm going to share with you now is, of course, with permission, a client that I've worked with for a while who felt kind of bad about scratching off a load. Just her gut was telling her, don't do this jump for whatever reason. And so, well, let's pick it up there.
Was the final push for me. I just had a gut feeling like just not today. It'll be here again next weekend.
That's great. I mean, to honor your gut is really important. It's easy to go with the peer pressure, but it's
Right.
not so easy to listen to your body and that the soft voice, I call it,
Yeah.
the one that says you shouldn't jump when there's
Hmm.
actually something's about to happen. If you do the jump or you get in that car or whatever, your guidance is telling you that you can avoid this, but it doesn't scream. The only thing that screams is the ego, which
Yeah.
is basically, sort of fear and separation based, and it's kind of a big fat bummer, always.
Right.
So whatever that is, you just got to put your fingers in your ears and listen quietly, you know,
Hmm.
listen for the guidance, and you did that. That's great.
Hmm. Thanks. The hardest part is telling them, I pulled myself off the load. Like, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but it wouldn't have been productive.
It's not about them,
Right.
right? Because they don't know what and
Hmm.
that secret intel is just as simple as how you feel. And even if there's no obvious reason, if you get in the plane not feeling great, it's hard to turn it around. You're going to get better at that. You're going to
Right.
get better at rationalizing, the risk, and okay, what are the winds? Is the gear okay? Do I know the skydive? Do I know the spot? That sort of
Hmm.
thing. Do I know where my holding area is? And if you have all that information and you just go, you know what, there's no reason not to. It's just a feeling. You're
Right.
gonna you're gonna be able to turn that around and clear your mind. As they say, shake the etch a sketch,
Hmm.
and sort of put all those thoughts aside and just be in silence for a little while. I like to go and sit in nature. You go out to the landing area if you got the time, and you just sit on that rock on the hill.
Absolutely. Yep.
Make that your kind of your sacred space, and you can often turn yourself around, when
Hmm.
you've made that sort of rational balancing process in your mind.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes you get to the end of that process and go, not all the boxes are checked. I don't like the wins, and I'm just drawing my line. Good for
Yeah.
you. Good for you.
Right.
But if you get to the end of the list and you find yourself still questioning your capabilities, often you kind of have to just sort of put all of those thoughts, that whole thought complex that you built and the emotions that came from it, shove it off to the side and call it misguided thought.
Hmm.
It just sort of let it go and stay with silence a little bit longer, in your own mind, and stay without a conclusion a little longer, stay in maybe a
Yeah.
little longer. You're in
Yeah.
maybe, you're in maybe until you're actually in free fall. you know,
Right.
you're in maybe right up until the time you get into the door and look around and make your decision whether you want to go or not. And I think
Yeah.
that's a
That's
powerful.
what that's what I've always said is like I am once I'm out of the plane, I'm fine. But
Yeah,
it's everything the ground and the ride up to altitude where I can just be my own worst enemy sometimes.
sure. Well, we all have that.
Yeah.
So what do we have to fend off the bully? The
Hmm.
bully in our minds. That it generates all these fear-based thoughts, and it skews our rationality. It
Hmm.
grabs greater. It actually adds weight to the things that we're afraid of, and makes us think that those things are likely. When they're not likely, they're just repeated thoughts that we've obviously brainwashed ourselves into expecting that reality.
Yep.
And so we all know, we've all done it in other circumstances, but the volume sort of turned up in skydiving. The emotions are more intense. So to spend more time with meditation and yoga and stuff, and cultivate your skill to just empty your mind, and then you'll hear the soft voice that says, you know how to do this.
Yep.
You're powerful, you're smart, you're strong, you're capable of solving problems, until you have that first cutaway.
You're right.
You know what I mean? Until you have that first off-field landing or that tumbled exit that you recover from. You do a back loop and it doesn't go so well.
Yeah.
And you're scared. Up to that point, you're scared. You're never going to get stable again if you get unstable. And then it happens. You arch and oh, good. One more thing that I can put in the category of power, of control. And you just got to keep revisiting those experiences that you've already had where you were a rock star, you're a superhero. Avoiding something in your car, or taking the deep breath when it could have been an argument and you used your skillful means to de-escalate a situation. We all have that capability.
Sure.
It's magic. It's magic. I think it's the strongest suit that the human beings have. We don't have long fingernails. We don't have big teeth. We can't run that fast. 4 days without water, we're dead. We're not that amazing. And yet our ability to turn our emotions around based on a rational appraisal, which takes notebooks sometimes, where you just draw a line down the middle, like, okay, what are my reasons for jumping right now? What are my reasons not to? Maybe you just do it in your mind. But I think it's really important to go through a ritual of rationalizing the risk so that you can proceed with caution sometimes,
Yeah.
It's dangerous, but you proceed anyway because you realize that it's not an unreasonable risk this time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very valid. Yes. Yeah.
But dealing with winds is that's one of the biggest reasons for people to stand down. And it's one of the best reasons to stand down when it's appropriate.
Right. Yeah.
The tricky bit is, when it's, 10, 12 miles an hour and everything's okay. And you get in your head.
Yeah.
Start picturing with that visualization center, you misuse the prefrontal cortex to visualize you landing off. Facing into the wind and going backwards, all those things are possible. Everything's possible. The question is, what are you going to make happen?
Right. Yeah.
That's the Sky Guide attitude that you need to start to allow within yourself, the confidence that no matter what it is, malfunction or other complexity, I got this.
Yeah.
I know where my handles are.
Yep. That's what I say. I'm like, I know where my handles are. I know all I really need to make sure I do is pull. And then I know where my cutaways are and what to do. So I have it all. I know what I'm doing.
Yep, absolutely. And even stuff like wear and tear on the gear that might trigger you initially, you just have to sort of absorb the initial wave of the adrenaline, the thoughts that happen that cause that adrenaline, and just wait a minute. Okay, what is this really? Is this what could this actually do? Like realistic. What are the possibilities? And then you pare that down to what is likely to occur. Right? Because there's always there's the possibilities and then there's the likelihoods. You got to live in likelihoods. Otherwise, you spend your whole life worrying about, everything.
Exactly. Yes. And I was just like, and that's what I've said. I made a lot of progress with my anxiety thus far. Like as far as what I've told you when I sold my house and I'm living life and things like that. And so I'm just like, and then after the afterthought, of course, after I pulled myself off, I was just like, why did I let it win?
Yeah. Well, it didn't win. Your power over your decision-making process won. So your ability to make that decision and stand down, you should feel proud of that every time you do it. Because I still haven't been hurt by a skydive I didn't do.
True. Yeah.
And I've not done a lot of them. Anywhere I walk out to the plane and go, or I'm about to put my rig on and maybe I just get this feeling. And then I go outside and I feel the wind. I like to stand out in the field and actually feel the pressure of the wind and get a sense of how much is it cycling up and down? How quickly? That's very significant, right? If you go from light winds to very strong winds, thermals are going on. You know,
Yeah.
that's where you get some bad turbulence. When you feel a drop in temperature real quick and then it warms up again, you know, just as the wind shifts in direction and that kind of thing. Those are the days that you are better off, I think, just, you know, being the experienced skydiver, sitting on the ground, watching the inexperienced jumpers get experienced.
Right. Yeah.
You watch them and you laugh and you're sitting on the ground going, oh man, I remember when I was a new jumper, you know, and I was suffering from hungry logbook syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And now, you know, I don't care if I jump or not. I'd love to jump. You know, Ken Kesey wrote a great book. I think you'd love it. It's very small. It's old, from the 60s. It was called Handbook to Higher Consciousness. And in that book, he said something that was an eye opener for me when I was a kid. You know, I don't know, maybe 18 or something when I read it for the first time, maybe younger. He said, up your addictions into preferences. Because the addiction to skydiving, the addiction to the sense of accomplishment, the addiction to feeling like I did it, I beat my fears or whatever, that's an addiction too. And it can cause you to jump when you shouldn't jump, you know. And if it's, so there's a need, you know, there's this compelling egoistic need to jump. And if you take yourself out of the ego self, don't let that, you know, sort of take the microphone and yell fearful thoughts at you. You know, you just sort of take the step back and go, you know, I do love jumping. I love it when it's right. And I love being a jumper on the ground when it's wrong. You know, because you're still a jumper when you're on the ground.
Yeah. This is another reason I was looking forward to this even more so after that earlier. I was just like, this is going to be the perfect time to tell and what happened.
Yeah. Well, we all find ourselves in those circumstances where the fear is really welling up. And then there's this decision-making process. And there certainly there's lots of times when you find yourself feeling a lot of, you know, just you feel it in your body, right? I don't feel good. I don't feel good about this jump. Okay, great. Good. Where's that guidance coming from though? Which voice? You know, you got higher self and you got lower self, and they both speak, but one of them screams, you know, and while the lower self screams, and the upper self whispers and encourages and is always loving and always accepting of everything you do, everything you choose, because, you know, it just loves you as you are. That's that's the true self. And so you just got to recognize when that bully voice is speaking up and it's not your voice.
Right.
That's the part that's really been very helpful for me to reframe what the ego is.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's the voices of all those other people I've interacted with. It's the voices of all the characters on the TV shows and the movies. You know, I'm embodying culture. I'm not being an individual. You want to be an individual, you listen to the higher self. So that's, I think, an important recognition.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
You know, who am I listening to? You know, which voice within me is the one that I've decided is real, and which one is just programming. You know, and the shame stuff is programming. We think we think we should beat ourselves for chickening out, right? That's the word they use. It chickened out. And as a chicken owner, I take offense to that, but it's, you know, we you know, if you really look at what a chicken does and thinks, and, you know, the way they act, they're all stimulus and response. They don't have the ability to evaluate that whether that loud noise was somebody clapping because their kid rode their bicycle for the first time out in the street, or, you know, it's a predator come to eat them and tear their head off. You know, it's all the same. They just react in fear automatically, right? Just like that. What was that movie, The Croods? You ever see it? I love it. And so you remember Nicolas Cage's character, the dad. And his wisdom was the old folk wisdom of the ego self, of the cellular self that's afraid that it's going to die all the time. That's all. It lives in mortal fear of that. Never not be afraid. That was the winning formula, right? Never not be afraid. And so as long as you recognize that that's kind of where the ego lives, then you can rise above it. You know, you can pull the microphone away from it and specifically ask your higher self, how do you feel about this? You know, is this okay or not? And then you empty your mind and you listen. You find out what, what your true feelings are, because our emotional guidance is pretty confusing. On the drop zone, whether you should jump or shouldn't jump is the big one. It's everything in life too, though. To be able to, to feel that emotion and recognize with compassion for yourself that maybe this was just my neurosis talking. This was the voice of the bully in school when I was a little kid that I still hear echoing in my mind saying, "You're too scared to go down the slide." It's the same voice. It hasn't evolved. It hasn't changed.
Right.
It's this sort of one-dimensional echo, and it's not helping.
That's so true. Yeah.
Peel, punch. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize how the fear always seems to come along with shame just afterwards, even a little bit during, in the decision process. There's this pull towards shame, and it's the most useless of the emotions.
It is. It's terrible. It's pointless.
Yeah, it tears us apart from the inside out. It's it's not helping. I do think that guilt, it's a terminology. I think guilt can be helpful. So if you aspire to somebody's moral virtues by pointing out that, the way you like rush through the door and push that old lady out of the way, maybe you can aspire to their higher ideals, and they can look back on and go, all right, well, maybe next time I'll stop and hold the door for the old lady. You can say that's a guilt trip. My kids say it to me all the time. "Oh, Dad, you're guilting me." No, I'm merely aspiring to your higher virtues, and that compassion doesn't only go out, because I can feel you. You're the kind of person that projects outward and you help other people. Selfless.
That's exactly what just happened, because I was just being another student like get out of his head going straight to the negative, and I'm like, why is it so easy for me to do that for everybody else?
Well, it'll be easy for you as well, as long as you shut down the other voice, and long enough for the other voice, the more positive one that you're using to help other people. You just point it at yourself. What would I tell somebody else?
Right.
But you have to objectify a little bit. You got to. Ego is so subjective. It's so in the experience. That's so real. Fear is immersive. But to be able to stay in that hot kitchen a little bit longer and just stop in the place of, I don't know yet, I haven't made a decision yet, but I'm going to stay here and clear my mind and relax my body, observe my situation, the specifics of this situation. And you jump when it's right. When the green light is on, you allow your inner child to take over, and you go and play in the sky.
Yeah.
You have to be ready for that, and ready for the other one where you watch the canopies are going like this, and you go,
yeah.
I don't need that.
Yeah.
I'm not in it to be afraid. I'm in it to play in the sky without being afraid.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Now, the other piece that I wanted to also mention that's been very helpful for me as well, especially doing scary stuff, because I do some things that really put me on edge,
right.
Jumping out of the airplanes over the mountains and that kind of thing, is to recognize that I've done my job. I checked my pilot chute, there's nothing else to do with that. I know the winds, I know the plan, and I get to the end of that and I empty my mind and I relax my body so that my body can speak to my brain through chemistry. By not using my body, there's like I'm running a white flag, or up the flagpole. I'm actually saying to my brain that's generating my thoughts, just you're at ease. You don't have to be ready for action. You don't have to be lock and load right now. Everything is okay right in this moment, and you just relax your body for a period of time, and you respirate bigger and slower. Big breaths all the way in, and you hold it for a moment. And then you slowly let it out. And it does something. It changes the thoughts that occur to you. We always think that the thought that comes up to us in the moment is the only thought that we could possibly have. And that's not true.
Right.
We could be just another train car in the long train of thoughts that I've already been having. And if that's based on neurosis, because that's the engine that's pulling that train, you're just making a longer neurosis train. Or if you calm yourself down, you slow the train down, and now you have the opportunity to possibly even change the locomotive to one that's more positive, ones that's eager and trustful of the self.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Right. So the slowing down shows up, and then you get to the end of that process. And you're sitting in the plane, you're like, I've done all I can do. Engines are noisy and people are starting to get ready. And I know, we're doing something big here. This is major. I'm literally about to throw my body at the planet and try to miss. And I usually recognize that this is about as low as my adrenaline is going to get. I don't want it to get to zero anyway, right? You don't want to fall asleep in free fall. You want to be alert and awake and exuberant, because that's what allows you to have bigger awareness and bigger capacity for athletic skill.
Mm-hmm.
That's what saves you, is your skills. And so I make a decision once I'm down there. Okay, this is about as calm as I'm going to get. Whatever's left over in terms of my adrenaline, that residual, I'm going to flip it around and not call it fear anymore. I'm going to choose to interpret that emotional experience as joy, as excitement. That's what I'm putting in my gas tank. That's what's going to get me to be able to pull hard. It's giving me what I need. That adrenaline is there for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But don't beat yourself up when you can't be like totally Dalai Lama mode in the plane. You just, you go in the general direction, you keep inching your chair closer to the Dalai Lama, and eventually go, I guess that's about as close as I'm going to get. And I'm going to be okay with this, that this is sufficient. I'm in my optimum performance state. My adrenaline is a 10. I'm not in optimum performance. I'm going to be useless and make terrible mistakes. I'm going to rush. I'm not going to have wide awareness. I'm not going to notice other people. My compassion goes down. My ability to visualize the good skydive is not there anymore, because I lose functionality of my prefrontal cortex when I get scared.
Mm-hmm.
I get angry. Same thing. Interesting. Sort of a sideline there, but
Yeah.
in terms of the brain physiology. And so I have to choose my emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Through the force of my will. Even though I've been kind of nervous and I've mostly focused on the task, check the handles. What did I forget? Oh, I forgot my helmet, Oh, is my GoPro on? And you get all that stuff done. And then you just enjoy respirating slowly in this state of elevated consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I'm wide awake and I'm excited. And the clock is ticking to my go time. And in a moment, I get to live my highest life. I get to live my dream.
Yeah.
I just tied about 1,000 shoes. I was volunteering at the field day at the elementary school today. Manning the basketball event or whatever. It was so much fun. Hundreds and hundreds of kids. And I know most of them already, because I go in there and, wear my wingsuit and I talk about it. I tied so many shoes at field day. So I think, you tie your own shoes, you put the rig on, you pay attention to the details, and you move slowly. Mm-hmm. You start getting geared up early. And you don't walk around with your rig because you get tired. You sit back down, but you put it on early enough that you can make this whole process like a mass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just each thing is a ritual. In your mind, you're almost hearing like classical music.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you put in earbuds and you actually listen to classical music. It's amazingly powerful. That's a great one. I use that a lot under canopy when I'm nervous. I'll sing to myself and sort of, soothe the savage beast a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's something to that. There's a lot of research that suggests that music, the right kind of music, obviously, not death metal or screamo, something
not
that's
in my playlist anyways.
Yeah, just exactly, me neither, but something that's going to make you feel good, make you feel happy, and slow tempo music if you can, and just go through this whole ritual of preparing yourself with full awareness. And then you can walk to the plane with flat feet, not on your toes rushing because you're late. You're the first one out there. And any time you have the opportunity, whether it's in the plane or waiting to get on it, I want you here. I had a cat a long time ago named Quincy, named after the World Free Fall Convention. That's where we used to have it. And Quincy was lazy. He was a fat, lazy cat, and he'd sit at Manifest at Skydive City, where I used to live, on the Manifest counter. He'd sit there, and everybody on the drop zone would pet Quincy. And he'd just sit there with his tongue hanging halfway out.
As a cat.
Yeah, just lazy mode.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to convey, is that if you always revert to lazy mode as your winning formula for your optimum performance kind of readiness, then you're actually ready. You know, nervous and checking your handle 17 times on the way to altitude, that's actually not ready. That's counterproductive.
Yeah.
So you try to observe your behavior and change your behavior. If you're fidgeting, if your shoulders are up here, if you got, inside your shoes, you got foot fists.
Yeah.
Relax, everything. Be as lazy as you can. And then you get under canopy and you check it and make sure it works, and you point yourself in a reasonable direction for that altitude, that moment, and you slow down the parachute, and maybe you grab onto the main lift webs. I think we talked about that, or you stick your thumbs in the rings on your, something like that, where you don't have to work hard, and you look at the horizon, you do it again. You cross your legs so you're comfortable, maybe get your leg straps forward a little bit. It's just lean back against it and look at the horizon and stop looking around.
Yeah.
No, those secrets,
That was a big reason that I got into canopy course, was just like my lack of confidence just under canopy in general, and feeling just lost, because that's where you lose the direct instruction. I mean, it's one thing to jump out and have the instructors holding on to you, and gradually they go down to one, and then they let go, and you're earning that along the way. And then you're kind of under canopy. You might have a radio on, but not to the progression of actually knowing really what you're doing with the fabric over your head.
I know. It's the hardest thing to teach.
Yeah.
There's the volume of information necessary for safe free falling in comparison to safe canopy flight is not the same.
Right.
Not even close. Not even close. And so that's why I do what I do. In the process of going up in airplanes with people who are terrified, I've learned a number of things. And one of the things that I've learned is that the process of learning how to deal with fear is not something that we're all very skilled in. And that process, if we become adept in it, can benefit us in every aspect of our lives. So when we deal with fear, we're dealing with really two different types of fear. We have hot fear, which is emotionally charged, it's intense, it's a physiological experience that we can feel, that we can measure as scientists. We can see the heart rate escalating, the blood pressure escalating, changes in the blood flow in the body, changes in the brain. And it changes what we're capable of doing, increasing our abilities in some categories and decreasing our abilities in other categories of behavior and thought. And I've also noticed that in addition to this hot fear, we also have a cold fear, which is generally caused by an emotional hot experience that happened sometime in the past, that causes us to have a pattern recognition program that causes us to avoid similar circumstances. That avoidance may save our lives if we recognize a danger before it actually arrives. The anticipation of danger is how we utilize our big brain to avoid big problems. However, as many of us have realized, that this process of dealing with questionable circumstances that look a lot, or at least in our minds, a lot like what we've seen in the past, it causes us to avoid things that have tremendous benefit. As many of us have also realized, there is a danger to avoiding everything that emotionally scares us, because the equating of fear and danger is erroneous. There are things that create emotional charge in our bodies because of these pattern recognition programs that are not actually dangerous, and the benefits of plowing through that fear in all the ways that we can sort of emotionally calm ourselves and charge ourselves up to break up through these barriers, it allows us to live a larger life, a more enjoyable life, a freer life. And as a society, we have solved all of our problems, but the fear often gets in the way of our beginning the process to solve those problems because of our avoidance tactics. Because we're traumatized. For a lot of different reasons, we have experienced things that were absolutely terrifying and recoiled. And as a result, we have then found ourselves avoiding benefits of doing things that scare us. So let's take a look at a little video. This is a video of my son. Now, he, at this point, at 2 years old, was not able to swim, right? And so he, just because of his basic nature as a child, because of his genetic predisposition, he is a gung-ho little guy. And here he is jumping into a pool below a waterfall filled with sizable fish without the ability to swim, fearlessly jumping into the water. And every time the villagers yell 1, 2 words, he doesn't know what could go wrong. He hasn't experienced the recoil that would result in the aversion as a result of something bad happening yet. Nothing bad has happened in this context for him. And so he's absolutely fearless, blindly so. Now, he's surrounded by safety, obviously, and I think he knows that his parents are going to help him. But he doesn't know that he's about to go big and dunk himself. So now he's underwater. Now he's swallowed some water. He's got it up his nose. You can see his eyes are red, and he's having a visceral experience. He's having a fear experience. He's having a physical displeasure experience. And he is, of course, now questioning whether this was a wise choice for him. But he also has this burning desire within him. I think all of us have this, but even more so as children, to live life to the fullest despite fear. So he's going to try to go for this again. He wants it. He wants it so bad. And he's scared, though. That's the problem. And so he gets back up onto this rock in the same circumstances before. He's done it many times in this day. And here he is, ready to go. And you can hear people, yelling the countdown, and he's not doing it. He's stuck. So he is now in this place of fear. Whether he would define it as fear or not is irrelevant. Terminology is not the issue. The experience is he is now not so sure of himself. He's not feeling so safe about his environment. And now there's something inside of his old brain that's saying, you're in danger. Don't move forward. Stay where you are. What you were doing was not a good idea. And of course, he's feeling in his body, his blood pressure is higher. His heart rate is higher. His body is now stiff and he's not comfortable and he's afraid. He's covering himself. And we remind him to hold his breath, and he holds his breath, and he is excited, right? Which is a very positive way to receive the adrenaline. Nevertheless, he's not going. He's still on that rock. This is the longest he's hesitated. As many of us in the skydiving and base jumping community have realized, the longer you stand there waiting to jump, the harder it is to finally get yourself that kinetic energy that's going to begin this experience that you want. So can you imagine yourself here, in his shoes, afraid to go? Can you think of things in your life where you find yourself afraid to move forward, afraid to express yourself, to tell the truth, to do the thing that you know you need to do on a soul level, on a moral level, right? On a career level, a relationship level? You gonna do it? Here we go. He breaks through. Now he's in a new place. He's moved from this place of fear with knowledge, Now he's broken through the barrier through his own heroism and support of his community to a new place called bravery with knowledge. And I would call that heroism. So here's my story, the adult version of that. Several years ago, I acquired one of the largest wingsuits in the world. We use these suits to glide through the sky and fly for miles and miles. And instead of falling at an average speed of 165 miles an hour, is typical for me on a skydive where I'm jumping skinny, where I just have a jumpsuit on. Whereas now we can fly in a very slow descent rate of only 30 or 40 miles an hour and forward at 100 or 110 or so miles an hour, depending on the body position. So this suit was my key to being Superman, and I was very, very excited about it. And I found myself really in the same boat as Joshua was, where I got the suit and I had absolute perfect clear intention without tremendous fear. I was a little nervous, but I know how to deal with fear, or so I thought. And I made several jumps with this suit, using the techniques that I teach my students. Breathe slow, calm down, believe in yourself, visualize the experience that you want, not what you don't want. And I made many jumps all over the world with this suit, and really, really enjoyed it. And I never ran into an extreme, terrifying experience. I was not terrorized, if you will. And so as a result, my fear level was dropping little by little through exposure to that experience. Now here we are on my my turning point jump, where I had a bad exit. The aircraft was going very fast when I jumped out, and I became unstable on all axes and settled into an inverted flat spin at very, very high speed of rotation. And I fought it in every way that I could, and I up till now, with 14,000 jumps at this point, I figured I could sort this out, and I ended up needing to sort it out with a parachute. I tried everything that I could. Now here I am, again, same jump, leaving the airplane, uses the rear view camera, and you can see a little bit better of how I'm flailing around looking for control and not finding it. A situation skydiving, I feel safe skydiving more than most people would because I've done it so much. And here I am feeling powerless to save myself, except for the one last ditch effort after fighting with aerodynamic principles. It just didn't work, so I got a canopy over my head. And so I was terrified. It took me quite a while to get my heart rate down after the parachute opened. As a matter of fact, after I landed, there was quite a while before I could sort of slow down and calm down. And so then there came this period of training, of systematic desensitization, a period of 2 years, in fact, of getting up the guts and the skill and the belief in myself that I could handle this. I made significant modifications to the suit to make it a safer design. I designed parachutes as a part of my career, and so it made sense to change the device itself to improve my level of safety. And I figured the more I could train, and here I am training in the house, and of course this video was just made in jest, but the truth is, the more we creep up back towards that edge, that place that made us afraid, the better we're going to feel about it when we finally get back on the horse. And we do need to. Now, there's certain things, like a car accident. You don't have to get into a car accident again to get over your fear of car accidents, but you do need to drive. So it's important to realize that it is possible to be both brave and afraid at the same time. Right? And very often when we see people doing brave things, whether it's a physical risk, or if it's something that is an emotional risk of some kind, public speaking, right, is the number one cause of extreme fear. It's the number one phobia for many, many people, not everybody. But when we find ourselves in these circumstances, we can compare ourselves very easily to what we think we should be feeling, instead of just accepting the way that we feel and embracing our fear, facing the fact that we are in an emotionally charged situation where the stakes are high, where we value the outcome significantly, and to sort of let it in that it's okay to be afraid in the process of facing fear despite the fact that we're afraid, right? Facing challenge despite the fact that we're having this tremendous physiological experience and taking on that physical feeling, taking on the question marks in our head, the doubts that are in our head, and moving forward because we know why we want to do it. That there's meaning behind it. And if you don't connect with the meaning, you're not going to be able to push through that emotional experience. So here is my first jump back on that suit. 2 years later. 2 years of flying smaller wingsuits and skydiving as much as I was able to in order to face my own fears in a way that seemed sane to me, in a way that seemed reasonable in terms of a training perspective, reasonable in terms of my own emotional abilities, because I know from experience that if I'm too afraid, I'm not going to perform well. So here we go, out the door. And I survived the exit. And of course, once you're out and flying the suit, there isn't as much that can go wrong. It's actually not very hard to fly a wingsuit. That's not the issue. The issue is getting out of the plane stable and flying, not hitting the tail of the aircraft, and also opening safely at a safe altitude. And so the meaning for me in this case is, number one, I want to fly. Since I was a little kid, I just loved the idea of flying. And to me, flying a wingsuit is about as close to that original feeling of joy that I was reaching for. The dreams that I had as a kid of being able to be so powerful that I can just, with my thought in subtle changes to my body shape, go to different places and be in control of something that is not terribly controllable. And so that's part of the meaning. Is this reaching for freedom, despite the fact that this thing is scary. But it's also, to me, about who I am and who I think of myself as a human being. That if I let fear back me down, right, if I let fear turn me into a smaller version of my original sense of self, my original intentions for life, then there's something that gets put into a box that doesn't want to be in a box. That my happiness requires expansion. It requires moving forward. It requires breaking through boundaries. And it requires a limitless expression of happiness in life through action. And so here I am still feeling the adrenaline, right? Because I haven't flown this suit in 2 years. But nevertheless, I'm thoroughly enjoying the experience. So what we have here is a high level of fear and a high level of joy at the same time, met with preparation, right? Because if you do something that's dangerous without preparing fully, well, you're not being very smart, are you? You're asking for trouble. And so I was not terrified, right? If I had felt truly terrified, I would have stayed in the airplane, right? I would have sat it out until I did feel better. Now here comes the parachute deployment. Looks good. Hey, and this of course is a parachute that I designed myself from scratch. It's a prototype that no one else in the world has. I had made lots of test jumps on it over the previous few years, but I actually felt better jumping this particular prototype than I did an established model because I had made modifications to this compared to the existing designs to improve the safety. So I was very pleased to be flying that thing. And so here we go. The perfect ending to a perfect skydive for me is diving the canopy at the ground, gathering about 60 miles an hour of airspeed, leveling off over the pond at Skydive New England, dragging a little water here, and landing on the sand. So a perfect completion. So what's gone on here is just like my son Joshua, that big smile is a knowledge that I did something heroic, that I broke through a fear that is real to me, right? Doing something that scares other people that doesn't scare you is not heroic, in my opinion. Right? So when we dig deep and we face our real fears that have some benefit on the other side of it, some profit, if you will, for our soul, well, that's worthwhile. And so let's take a closer look at what is fear in the first place, and what's happening to our consciousness in this process. So if you know what fear is on a deeper level, you're going to have a longer lever for modifying your experience. So perceived a threat comes in and causes a change in our bodies and a change in our cognition, because the brain changes. We have old brain structures and new brain structures. The old ones that have been in our heads since Australopithecines and before that even, right? We've got these structures that cause us to have tremendous physical power, right? The ability to fight our way through danger. And then we have these newer brain structures, the newest being the prefrontal cortex, where we have the ability to think our way through danger of all kinds. The ability to have willed action, the ability to think outside of the given data, right? To creatively solve our problems with our visualization center, right? That's the part of the brain, this prefrontal cortex, that can save us, and yet that's the part of the brain that shuts down during an intense fear response. And it also shuts down when we're in all kinds of negative emotion, like anger to a certain degree, to a lesser degree. We'll talk about that. But interestingly, this part of the brain, where we can sort of think our way through things and calm ourselves down, is dark under these circumstances of intense physical fear. But it's also dark when we continue to avoid, because we don't visualize solutions, we don't visualize possibilities when we're avoiding the thoughts about something that scares us. So it's a stopping of your consciousness. It's a wall. And so if we're going to enliven this prefrontal cortex, which offers us so much, right? Not just creativity, but compassion, sourced right here in the front part of the brain, the part of the brain that shuts down when you get high levels of fear. So we could call this a hostile takeover. The old brain is in control, and the new brain is now sort of de-emphasized, because you don't need, according to evolution or whatever caused your brain to be what it is, you don't need higher cognition when you're in danger. That may or may not be true. Interestingly, we have the ability within this structure, the prefrontal cortex, to cause the old brain to lose control, and the willed action that comes as a result of higher cognition to now become empowered. So we have the ability to lose or gain control all from the front part of the brain. So we better learn how to do that. And this process is a skill. To grab the reins of the horse again after she starts running out of control. You have the ability to do that, but it must be a cultivated skill, in the way that training our bodies for physical activity prepares us and reduces us the chance of injuries under those circumstances. And so our ability to work through emotionally charged circumstances and not experience emotional trauma is increased as a result of choosing a brave path, choosing to take on dangerous things physically or emotionally, or both, so that we can cultivate our ability to be brave and afraid at the same time. So in fear, we have three compartments, if you will, that are all interconnected. They're all part of the same feeling of perceived threat, causing us to realize we're not in a normal mundane moment here, where we're in some sort of danger. And of course, we have fight, we have attack, we have the associated emotion of anger, right? And what typically happens in the negative forms of this is displaced aggression, right? So when we have a high level of stress in our bodies, you're rushing, your kids are late for an appointment, and you're trying to get them in the car, and they're distracted and they're running all around, and you're getting angry at them. Of course, you're just worried about your ego, right? Losing face is one of the things that we're terrified of. And so we have this thing in us that's causing our heart to go faster and our blood pressure to come up, and our cortisol levels, right, the stress hormone, to kick in. And as we plow faster and harder at it, we create more problems. So then we also have the flight, the escape instinct, right? And this is part of fear, but it feels different, distinctly different from the emotion of anger, from that fight instinct. Because when we are escaping, we're not necessarily solving the problem. Now, we're talking about getting chased by a bear and climbing up a tree. Well, by all means, go and run as fast as you possibly can and climb as high as you possibly can. And your body will be deeply prepared to do this, right? Now, is it capable of doing it carefully, skillfully, and with compassion for the people around us? Not necessarily, right? Because we all have heard of circumstances where people have run out of a stadium in a stampede and trampled other people and even killed them. So the ability to see outside of our unidirectional escape, which is not about where we're going as much as it is where we're coming from, right? And so we're not really using our visualization center to think through our best case scenario, right? We're not reaching for the best case scenario. We're trying to avoid the worst case scenario. That's a very, very different mindset. And when we look at a typical response on a societal level, this flight instinct causes us to reach for behaviors and chemicals that numb us and put us in a completely different place, where we're distracted, all right? Where we're doing things that put us in a completely different mindset, where we don't have to think about what we're afraid of. We're escaping by disengaging. Right? We're running away from our problems. You should be doing your homework. You're not doing your homework. You're watching TV, right? So this is a common, natural result of the flight instinct. Is it beneficial? Not necessarily, but it does come easily for us. And the third one is the most sort of insidious. This is the most dangerous one. The freeze instinct comes from our inner program that says, hide from the danger, don't move, breathe real quiet, and wait for the danger to go away. And the deer in the headlights, of course, doesn't necessarily avoid getting hit by the truck. That comes from running away. But if we freeze, and the cognition consequently freezes, we stop processing, we stop looking for answers. The best case scenario is nowhere in the house. As a matter of fact, no answer is anywhere in the house. And we now find ourselves stuck. And the feeling of stuckness is the basement of fear. It's the place where we feel helpless. When you ponder things about, for instance, you send your kids off to school and you hear about another school shooting, and you feel like there's nothing you can do to address this fear. This is freeze, right? Because you really have no action that can be taken. There is no escape unless you're going to pull the kids out of school and homeschool them, which some people have chosen to do. But we have not thought things really well and carefully. Now, of course, the appropriateness of our fear, the likelihood of the worst case scenario playing out is another matter. But here we are in this place of stuckness as a result of our appraisal of the situation. And we feel awful and we feel powerless. And it breaks down our bodies, because when we stay in an elevated level of stress, an elevated level of worry, if we can't turn off that spinning wheel of worry, visualizing what we don't want repeatedly over and over and over and over, well, then we're going to find ourselves having a heart attack. We're going to have ourselves having a panic attack. We're going to have ourselves worrying to the point where we are completely impotent to solve our problems. This is the danger of fear, is the freeze instinct more than anything else. So rationality is something that we have to introduce into this discussion, because in rational thought, we weigh out the likelihood of what is happening versus our ability to avoid it happening. And there's a real problem that happens when the body gets charged so much as a result of these looping negative thoughts that we can skew our expectations way outside of what is actually likely to happen, and rationality retreats into the distance. So, for instance, something we call exposure bias. So you watch the TV news, right? Or you go to the Google News on your phone and you see what's going on in the world. And it's very easy as a result of that to kind of draw conclusions based on your level of exposure to things like terrorism, things like diseases that are going on in the world, and make this into this. This is what we call exposure bias, because you've been exposed to it so much that you start to skew your expectation about the proportions of probability. So now we find ourselves in irrational thought, irrational expectation, and we start addressing or worrying about, which is not actually addressing, it's just thinking about these problems that are not likely to occur, and we ignore other things that are much more likely to get us, like that greasy cheeseburger that we just ate causing coronary artery disease. The more likely event is that you're going to get it in a car accident, isn't it? And yet here we are driving down the highway, texting as we're yelling at our kids, and we're not paying attention that the real danger is right here in front of us. Your diet is more likely to kill you than a terrorist. Very few people have actually, in proportion to the number of people in the world and the number of deaths that happen every year, terrorism doesn't happen much, is irrational because it is not in relationship to the probability of that actually occurring. And that irrationality resulting in a freeze sort of experience in the consciousness causes us to stop asking the questions, what can we do to reduce the risks? What can we do to increase our perceived ability to solve the problem? We have ways to solve our problems, even if they are low probability problems, but the real risk is when we become paralyzed and we stop thinking proactively, solution-oriented thought. And we find ourselves in this less than optimistic view of the world. And that's the real danger. So let's talk about what we can do to address the physiological and cognitive aspects of adrenaline. Right? I call it adrenaline management. Step one, you got to accept the fact that you're scared. The ego says, I'm never scared. Right? I've worked with lots and lots of military guys, and most of them don't admit to ever being afraid, because the aggressive response in war helps them to feel less afraid because it's a forward motion sort of attitude. The truth is, though, that if you measure their chemicals in their body, if you measure their heart rate and blood pressure and the activity in their brain, they are definitely in a fear space. Of course they are. Right? And so to accept the fact that that's where you are is the beginning of change. And denial of it is how you put the old brain structures, the reptilian brain, right? The adrenal cortex starts to kick in. So first thing, respiration. So if we want to live an inspired life, we have to inspire appropriately when we're meeting with a stress moment, when we're feeling the heart rate and the blood pressure changing, when we're feeling our breathing changing, a high frequency, low amplitude breathing technique to, we deliberately change it to a low frequency, high amplitude breathing. We change our emotional response. The body is set up to receive behaviors as much as you could give somebody medication to calm them down. You can do that yourself. So when you look at the mechanics of breathing, we have a muscle in here we call the diaphragm, and we have muscles here we call the intercostal muscles. That's what drives the breathing. You have no muscles directly attaching to your lungs, and if you want to get control over your breathing, you have to understand one very important principle, is that the natural shape of your diaphragm when it's relaxed is like this. So in other words, exhaled is your natural state. And when you inhale, it flexes and flattens. This diaphragm is under tension when we're inhaling, which is why the fear response often can be coupled with a sort of jerky, intense inhale. And so if we recognize that this is true, we can deliberately change the mechanics of our breathing by breathing in all the way and then letting it out very slowly. The yogis teach us ujjayi breathing, right? Restricting the throat and letting it out with either a hissing noise or, as some people do, and if you spend more time in this relaxing exhale phase of your breathing and less time gulping the air, you're going to start to feel better. And if you start to feel better, you start to have different thoughts, and it begins to re-enliven your prefrontal cortex. And so the solutions start to occur to you, right? The thought shows up, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I originally appraised. Maybe I have more power over the circumstance than I thought. Maybe I have more power over my physiological state than I thought. Now, something else also plays in here is that the source of fear is thought, right? The source of fear is a thought that is looped about an unwanted experience. And if we're going to be really good at the ability to stop that cycle, we have to be comfortable with the absence of thought. We can cultivate that ability. There's a lot of different ways. And of course, under the general category of meditation, which can be sitting down and just following your breathing and being in silence for 15 or 20 minutes. On a regular basis, you can change your relationship to silence. You can increase your ability to pull out that card when you most need it. When you say, wait a minute, I'm looping this negative thought and it's not serving me. It's not leading me to solutions, and it's making my heart race and I feel terrible. So if I can let go of thought, right, if I can overcome my shiftiness that happens in silence, well, then I'm capable of many things. I'm capable of changing my feeling as a result of clearing my head. Right? And this is something that skydivers do. Pretty much all of them. When they're feeling fear, they hold their head still, they hold their eyes still, they breathe big and slow, and they calm down, they allow a little gentle smile on their face, and they just let it go. They let thought go. And of course, many people will say, well, I'm not uncomfortable with silence. Okay, well, let's try it, right? You can take any given audience and say, let's do 60 seconds. Let's try 60 seconds of absolute silence. Hold still, see if you can keep that nervous giggle from kicking in, right? See if you can get that laundry list of things that you want to be doing later on, and the thoughts about how uncomfortable this is, and the thoughts about your chair, the thoughts about the smells and the sounds, and right? See if you can just, for 60 seconds, be silent. Let's try it. Beginning, it's a struggle, isn't it? The thoughts come, don't they? And so you start to realize when we're trying to be silent in our minds, that the mind wants to keep going. Right? It's like trying to stop a river of thought. But the more you do it, the more it feels good, doesn't it? And it starts to feel peaceful. And it starts to give you a sense that you can sit in silence, right? Physically or metaphorically. And then you realize that silence is something that feels good and it's something that you want more of. You start to see more opportunities in your life to reach for silence, right? You can be sitting on a rock by a river and watching the water go by, yes. You can also be paddling your kayak in a lake and just enjoying the flow of motion and the rhythm of that. You can be dancing to music and completely focused on that music, and that is a meditation too. And so we need to expand our definition of what we would call a quiescent activity, to quiet, so that we can be in this state more often, so that when the intense fear comes and when we notice ourselves in a cold fear response where we're not processing, where we're not thinking about something that really worries us, we can sort of cool down the intense one and warm up the cold one and find ourselves in a clear place where action, appropriate thought and action, can occur to us. And we can start to solve our problems. So another important branch of these solutions is from a chemical that your body produces, or it's a hormone called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is associated, the first time I had ever heard of it in school, was associated with sort of warm, loving feelings and physical touch. Mothers produce it while they're nursing their babies. And interestingly, it's also a stress hormone. That's right. So your body produces, in addition to its cortisol, which is rising you to the challenge and giving you physical power, bumping up your ability to act physically, it's also giving you the solution to that. You'll be able to sort of augment that intensity and reach for the things that will help you to feel better. Your heart has receptor sites in it for oxytocin that helps it to deal with the stress, to heal, right? And so when we, for instance, hug someone when we're in stress, hug someone when we're in fear, when we reach out to another human being when we're in a state of fear and feel that warmth, feel that loving sensation, we realize the truth of the statement that fear and love are in opposite ends of the emotional spectrum. That if we reach for this warm sensation emotionally, we're capable of softening our fears, you know. And so the thunderstorm is kicked in, the power is out in the whole neighborhood, and the little children are scared. Yeah, sure, you can sit in your house in the dark and with the candles and shudder, and every time the lightning kicks in and the wind is blowing the trees up against the house, and you're wondering if a tree's going to fall on your house. Sure, you can do it that way. Lots of people do. Most people do. Or you can have potluck suppers, light some candles, and sing songs in the darkness, right? You can change the way that you feel as a result of community. And so when people are afraid, what they're most needing is each other. So love is one of the answers to fear. So another key element here is how we wear the stress. So in other words, when you're feeling intense emotional experience kicking in, to say no to it will cause you to have this sort of emotional friction that generates damage to the body, damage to cognition, and damage to your ability to visualize solutions. And yet, when you say yes to the stress and enjoy the stress and say, this adrenal response here is giving me everything I need to plow through this, to solve this problem, to enjoy the fear, is a very powerful way to flip-flop the energy and just say, I'm not going to try to snuff out this fire. I'm going to try to warm myself by it. I'm going to try to cook my dinner with it, right? The fear is giving you what you need. And when you interpret stress that way, it doesn't have the negative effects. There's lots of scientific evidence now that points to the conclusion that it is the expectation that stress is going to cause damage to your body. That's what causes you to have damage to your body, because when we receive it in a positive way, for instance, the blood vessels don't constrict, increasing your blood pressure, right? They remain expanded, and the heart is able to give you your muscles the nutrition that you need, right? And give resources to your brain to continue functioning optimally to solving problems. So here's the way I look at it. We have the dynamics of flight, which of course I've spent a lot of my life teaching about, where we have thrust that drives us forward and that generates lift. And of course gravity is still pulling down, and depending on what we do, our weight vector is pulling down to varying degrees. And always we have pulling back this resistance to forward motion we call drag. But we also have the metaphysics of the human experience, where we have passion that drives us forward, inspiration, meaning, purpose, right? And then we have belief in ourselves and belief in our world, that everything's going to be okay. And that's the analogous to lift in this. And then, of course, pulling in the opposite direction is doubt, is negative expectation, based on failures of the past or worries that we're going to have failures in the future that actually increase the likelihood of those things occurring. We because you're not preparing for the best case scenario, you can't possibly intersect with that experience. And then, of course, we have pulling back on all of it, fear, this resistance to motion. The faster you go, the more fear you're going to have, the more intensity is. The more you love your children, the more you're going to be worried about them. It's natural. All right? So you can't have a stable human being, a sane human being without fear. This is part of life. But if you try to avoid that fear pulling back by never engaging intensity, by never reaching towards passion, right? Never towards reaching towards a full expression of yourself at the risk of looking ridiculous, of failing in public view, right? At the risk of standing up for something that is meaningful. If you don't have that passion driving you forward, you're never going to have the experience of being in command of your life. And of course, meaning is the one thing that prolongs life more than anything else. It gives us a reason to continue breathing in and out, a reason to continue getting up in the morning, despite the fact that you're still going to be interfacing with fear. This is life. So we have this commitment that is necessary to drive forward. And this place of passion, when you ponder the word passion, it doesn't have to be only about the positive, call it positive emotion experience of joy, of hedonic pleasures, of the experience of flying my wingsuit through the cloud. That is a passionate experience. And yet there's also an aspect of passion when you think of, for instance, someone of the Italian culture, right? When you see passion, passion can be anger and love and anger and love, right? Because it is the full expression of human emotion without resistance. And so if we find ourselves trapped into this freeze place or looping into these numbing behavior patterns that are unhealthy through chemicals, right? People drink, they do all kinds of things to their bodies to numb themselves. They escape by doing things that are impertinent to their own safety, right? They eat comfort food to feel better. This is all the slowing down of the aircraft in the direction of passion, in the direction of motion. And so to push off of that fear requires to flip-flop it and move into the sanest of the three fear responses, which is fight, which is anger, appropriate anger, healthy anger with a visualization of where this is going. So in other words, if we charge forward into it, if we say yes to the fear, if we paddle with the wave and go with the flow, and the more intensity we are experiencing as a result of the circumstances, the more we have to lean forward into it and say yes. Because if we don't, that wave will pummel us. It'll destroy us physically and emotionally. So the source of happiness is not always going straight to joy. Often it is to say, no, I don't like that, and I'm tired of that. Enough of that already. I am going to push off of it, and I'm going to solve my problems, whether it be financial or violence in the world or not getting things done, or I'm sick of having a dirty house. I'm going to clean my house with healthy aggression. This is part of the process of dealing with fear. That aggression and anger can be the only thing that pushes us up off the bottom. So, to choose bravery, to choose all of these things that help us in the skillful process of finding our way through fear, finding our way through the emotional roller coaster that is life, it is a choice. It's a choice to deliberately explore danger, to nurture our ability to handle high-intensity emotional experiences. To explore danger because there's beauty there, right? You don't see the grandeur of a mountaintop without dealing with the fear of climbing it, right? And so as a metaphor, we really have to think of that as everything in our lives requires us to take on deliberate, purposeful challenge, not pointless danger, and see what that brings up for us. Daring to be yourself, daring to be funny, to be silly, to tell the truth about what you believe in. This is what allows human beings to feel full. And if you keep it in a box because you're afraid to show your true colors in the world, and you wear that black hat and you cover yourself in the black clothes like you're in a suitcase there, you're not showing the world who you are. And as a result, you're going to forget who you are. And if you don't know who you are, there's no reason to get up in the morning. The daring to pursue inspiration in life, to pursue the things that risk failure in something that's valuable to you. It's dangerous, for sure, to pursue things that inspire you. But if you don't, and you just go into the drone mode of getting up in the morning, doing your job for the money, not because you love it, and waiting for the weekend. And then you get to the weekend and you're so burned out by this job that is sucking all your energy out that all you want to do is lay on the couch and watch TV. That's not exactly the inspired life that causes people to feel happy in their life. To get to the end of their life, right? So picture yourself at the end of your life when you're very old, you're laying in that deathbed. Do you have regrets or not? This is an important concept, because if you cannot look forward to that death moment, which is terrifying, of course, and consider, did you do everything that you came here to do, right? When you still have the time to do it. Right? Then you're not going to be able to muster the meaning that causes you to get up, to stand up, to do what is necessary, to do the right things in life, to speak up about the things that are meaningful for you, because the world is not changed by people who are driven by fear. The world is changed by people who believe in themselves, who believe in something, and they are not afraid of being afraid. Fly so high.